Today we'll be sampling a real borderline single malt. And I mean it in the very best way and sense possible. We'll be drinking Glengoyne, the 21-year-old. An exciting single malt, smooth, well balanced, full bodied. A real treasure in the glass. Welcome to our review here at Bespoke Unit. Hello and welcome, malt fans and peat heads, for another single malt review here at Bespoke Unit. My name is Reinhard, and the name of this beauty is Glengoyne. Glengoyne is a whiskey distillery that sits in the Highlands of Scotland, and it's actually the southernmost of the Highland distilleries on the Scottish whiskey map. Fun fact though, even though the stills sit in the Highland region, the warehouses where the casks are being stored and matured is just across the street, which is actually the Highland line. Thus, the casks are actually matured in the lowlands. So that's why Glengoyne is what I call a real borderline single malt. The 21-year-old is primarily casked in first fill sherry casks. Thus, I'm expecting a lot of the typical rancio, nutty, sort of dark, fusty, earthy, very mature characteristics of this single malt. But we'll get to that in just a second. In terms of the overall presentation, it's a very long, slim bottle. It's actually not the newest rendition of the bottle because this has been sitting on my whiskey shelf for probably 2 to 3 years, I would say. In any case, it's a very elegant, long, slim bottle, proudly stating the emblem of the Glengoyne distillery, which you can also see embossed here on the back side of the bottle. Then it reads, "I guarantee that this single malt whiskey has been maturing in oak cask for a duration of at least 21 years, signed by the distillery manager. The ABV is 43% alcohol by volume, and Glengoyne says that, like all Glengoyne malts, the 21-year-old is distilled solely from air-dried barley." So that is a feature of the distillery that they're being very proud of. Other than that, what's interesting about Glengoyne is they are now solely using renewable energy to run their entire operation. They have some little add-ons like a beehive on site, and thus they're trying to really think about their ecological footprint and a sustainable long-time operation for the future, because the distillery has been up and running since 1833. Let's get right to the tasting. First of all, as always, we're looking at the color, a dark, rich copper gold that we have here, thick, oily viscosity, heavy legs right here in the glass. As you can see, the nose, it's full, it's rich. I don't even have to get anywhere near this glass. I don't have to get close because it's already there. A lot of nuttiness, a lot of mint freshness, ethereal freshness, even after 21 years of aging. Rich, even funky, like an overripe banana. Mellow, rancio, a lot of caramelized walnuts, even tea bag that is there, and a little bit of soy sauce and a umami touch just in the back to give some extra liveliness and some extra excitement to the nasal expression. Rich sherry, even cherries, a thick marmalade-like cherry sensation, some orange peel, bitter orange marmalade, and a bit of brioche, even though that again is also rich. It's put into a pan with a lot of sugar and butter, so heavily caramelized, almost like a pain perdu, or a very dessert-like Christmas pudding-y touch. It feels salty in the back. I just get like a tingling, prickly sensation right on top of my nose. It reminds me slightly of white pepper, but also myrrh and olibanum, a very perfume-like quality. It then slowly transcends into the fruitiness yet again, before towards the very back, sort of a slight smoke makes some sort of an appearance, but not as a peaty smoke sensation, because Glengoyne doesn't use peat for the malt of the production of this whiskey, but rather a charred oak characteristic and a rich, earthen, woody sherry cask smokiness. All right, let's take a sip. It's superbly elegant. The first realization here is really, even though the nose is so concentrated, so compact, full and rich, the palate suddenly soothes you. Superbly elegant. It's like this whiskey doesn't have to show off its guts or balls or muscles. It's all there. It's soft. A touch of white pepper yet again in combination with myrrh. A dry, fusty cellar touch right up front. Then the caramel sweetness, some of the Christmas pudding, and the traditional baking spice like cinnamon, cloves, and nutmeg are there. And then towards the back of the palate, the orange rind, again, bitter, tea bag-ish, and a little bit of Costa Rican tobacco. Before then, the finish really goes into a focused mineral, slightly salty, but superbly long after taste. Let's give it a second sip here. There is a very mature, overripe, tropical fruit note. It reminds me of a charred pineapple, a little bit of that overripe banana that I sensed in the nose at the beginning, and European cask nuances. Now, obviously, this is not your standard go-to cocktail pour. This is more an elegant whiskey single malt that you would have in a Glencairn glass, like the one that I'm having right here, or a traditional nosing glass. Probably a large block of ice if you prefer to have your whiskey neat, but with a chunk of ice in there. For me, straight, no ice, no water does the trick right here. Being 43% volume of alcohol, this really doesn't need an awful lot of dilution or opening up with a splash of water added. It's perfect as it is. Definitely, I would love to have some walnuts as my little finger food snack with that. Dates or dried figs would also make for a lovely finger food pairing. And when it comes to cigars, I want something elegant. I want something that is just as complex, just as refined and very nuanced, subtle, but with a lot of character. So I would go for a Don Carlos from Arturo Fuente, something like The Eye of the Shark, a real all-time classic. And you just can't go wrong with these. A 21-year-old Glengoyne and An Eye of the Shark, and you'll be in heaven. That's time well spent all by yourself. This most certainly is an occasional dram. It's a rather expensive whiskey, given the overall price evolution of Scottish single malt whiskey. It's definitely more expensive than it used to be. For many years, Glengoyne was sort of an under-the-radar tip for insiders, but it certainly morphed into, well, a much respected and much loved single malt whiskey. I definitely say Glengoyne is one of the most beautiful and picturesque distilleries that you could find in Scotland. So just up north of Glasgow, it's definitely also a must-see once you're in the area. The bottle will set you back roughly $160 right now. It's not a flashy, sort of super glamorous decanter. It's just a regular whiskey with an almost pot still like shape of the bottle. Great bang for your buck overall, I would say, and most definitely a single malt whiskey you should try. Glengoyne 21. I'll have another sip of that. I'll leave it to you, and I'll see you next time here at Bespoke Unit for another spirited review. Cheers, and with my very best wishes and spirits.